Hi everyone, welcome back to DGMC, Diwan-e-Ghalib, Meri Zubani. To all our returning viewers, we are very happy you could join us again. And to the new viewers, we are delighted you discovered the podcast and decided to tune in for the first time. Now, if you were with me in the previous episode, you know that currently we are going through Ghazal 28 from Diwan-e-Ghalib. Gilaa hai Shauq ko, Dil mein bhi Tangii-e-Jaa ka. We have already covered 3 couplets. Today we are going to cover the 4th couplet. As always, I'm going to read the couplet first and then we will get into the keywords, concepts and finally the DGMZ impression of the couplet. So, this is how the शेर goes. Gham-e-Firaaq में तकलीफ-ए-सैर-ए-बाग ना दो. गम-ए-फिराक में तकलीफ-ए-सैर-ए-बाग ना दो. मुझे दिमाग नहीं खानदा-हा-ए-बेजा का. Let's start with an approximate translation. First line. गम-ए-फिराक में तकलीफ-ए-सैर-ए-बाग ना दो. In my grief of separation, do not propose or offer a stroll in the garden, a walk in the garden. मुझे दिमाग नहीं खानदा-हा-ए-बेजा का. I have no mind for misplaced smiles. So, on the surface, that is the approximate translation. Let's start getting into the keywords. The first word, a word complex, is Gham-e-Firaaq. Gham is sorrow, Firaaq is separation. Gham-e-Firaaq becomes sorrow of separation. And when we are talking of Gham-e-Firaaq in Urdu poetry, it usually is sorrow of separation from the beloved. Lover's sorrow of separation from the beloved. इस पर कमर जलालवी का शेर. सोजे गमे फिराक से दिल को बचाए कौन, जालिम तेरी लगाई हुई को बुझाए कौन. The approximate translation is, from the burning of the sorrow of separation, who can possibly save the heart? O cruel one, who can extinguish the fire that you have ignited? And the cruel one is, of course, the beloved. महमूद अब्दुल कादिर का शेर. दागे गमे फिराक मिटाया न जाएगा, रोशन है ये चराग बुझाया न जाएगा. The approximate translation is, the scar of the sorrow of separation will never be erased. This lamp, once lit, will never be extinguished. By extension, the sorrow of separation is here to stay. नीलेश नूर का ये शेर. गम-ए-फिराक में गर हम दहक रहे होते. गम-ए-फिराक में गर हम दहक रहे होते तो आफताब से बढ़कर चमक रहे होते. Beautiful couplet. The approximate translation is, if I had been shining bright in the sorrow of separation, if I had been illuminated in the sorrow of separation, then believe me, I would have been shining even brighter than the sun. Such is the fire of sorrow of separation. मुंशी शिव प्रसाद वहाबी का ये शेर. गम-ए-फिराक का खटका विसाले यार में है. गम-ए-फिराक का खटका विसाले यार में है, खिजा का खौफ हमें मौसम बहार में है. Lovely couplet. The approximate translation is the fear, the anxiety of the sorrow of separation is with me even in the union with the beloved. Even during the union with the beloved, even during the union, I am dreading the sorrow of separation. And even during the spring, I am already dreading the autumn. I am already dreading the winter. So that takes care of Gham-e-Firaaq as a word complex. Sorrow of separation, by extension, lover's sorrow of separation from the beloved. Let's move on to taklif. Taklif is a common word. We use it in our local language. What it translates to is some kind of trouble, some kind of difficulty, some kind of inconvenience, right? Something that troubles you. इस पर अब्दुल हामिद अदम का ये शेर, साकी तुझको एक थोड़ी सी तकलीफ तो होगी, सागर को जरा थाम, मैं कुछ सोच रहा हूँ. So the approximate translation is, Cupbearer, it might trouble you a little, but can you please hold my goblet of wine for me for a minute, because I am thinking. I'm thinking about something very important. So that takes care of taklif. Moving on to Sair-e-Baagh. Sair is a stroll, a walk, usually for pleasure. And Baagh is, of course, garden. So, stroll in the gardens. वो famous phrase याद है, walk in the park, right? So, stroll in the garden, a walk in the park. इस पे नाजी शकीर का ये शेर, ना सैरे बाग, ना मिलना, ना मीठी बातें हैं, ये दिन बहार के ए जान मुफ्त जाते हैं. The approximate translation is, no stroll in the gardens, no meeting up, no sweet nothings spoken to each other. All these days of spring, my dear who is more precious to me than life itself, all these days of spring are going to waste. And the last one from Mir Muhammad Bedar, जाते हो सैरे बाग को अग्यार साथ हो, जो हुक्म हो तो ये भी गुनहगार साथ हो. The approximate translation is, you are off to your stroll in the gardens with rivals, strangers, opponents accompanying you. If you permit, then may this wretched one also accompany you along with all those people to your stroll in the gardens. मीर तकी मीर का ये शेर, अब के भी सैरे बाग की जी में हवस रही, अपनी जगह बहार में कुंजे कफस रही. Beautiful couplet. Approximate translation is, even this time, the desire, the lust, the want, right, the need to have a stroll in the garden stayed in my heart only. And again, this time too, in spring, I was limited to my corner, to my prison, to my cage. I was not freed to enjoy the spring. Moving on to Khandaa. Now, Khandaa is smile or laughter, right? A very hearty laughter or a very hearty smile, open, generous smile. इस पर मिर्ज़ा गालिब का शेर। बुलबुल के कारोबार पे हैं खांदा-हाए गुल, कहते हैं जिसको इश्क खलल है दिमाग का। So the approximate translation is, because of the business of nightingales, and by extension because of the business of nightingales singing, is dependent the business of flowers blooming. This thing that is called love is but a mind game, mind trick, mind illusion. मीरा जी का ये शेर, नहीं गिरिया और खांदा में फर्क कोई, गुड वन, नहीं गिरिया और खांदा में फर्क कोई, जो रोता गया दिल तो हंसता गया दिल. The approximate translation is, there's not a lot of difference in crying and laughing. When the heart went crying, the heart went laughing. So in the joy was hidden the pain, in the pain was hidden the joy. So that takes care of Khanda. Let's move on to Bejaa. Bejaa is something which is out of place, something misplaced, something that goes out of its limits. Sometimes Bejaa is something which is in too much excess, too much. इस पे अनीस दहलवी का ये शेर, तुम्हारा खौफ रसवाई है बेजा, कहाँ गिरना है आंसू जानता है. Beautiful couplet. The approximate translation is, beloved, the couplet is addressed to the beloved. Beloved, this fear of yours, this fear of being dishonored, this fear of being shamed, right? This fear of yours is misplaced. By extension, it is not correct. You do not need to fear about being dishonored or about being shamed, because the tear knows where it should drop. By extension, the tear knows where it should not be dropped, not be shed. So don't worry about my tears. They know exactly where to shed and where not to shed. Never will my tears be a reason for your dishonor or your shaming. So that takes care of all the key words: Gham-e-Firaaq, Taklif-e-Sair-e-Baagh, and then Khanda. Let's start getting into the impression. First line, Gham-e-Firaaq mein Taklif-e-Sair-e-Baagh na do. During the grief of separation, do not give me trouble of a stroll in the garden. Do not offer me the troublesome stroll in the garden. Ghalib starts the first line with the biggest nemesis, the biggest challenge of a lover's life. Gham-e-Firaaq, or grief of separation. More accurately, like we said, grief of separation from the beloved. The lover is in a state of extreme grief and despair because of the separation from the beloved. For the lover, a blooming garden in spring is one of those places that reminds him of the beloved in multiple ways. Amir Chand Bahaar ka ye sher. Amir Chand Bahaar ka ye sher. दुनियाए रंगो बू में उसी का था एहतमाम, वो गुल बदन नहीं तो बहार चमन कहाँ. The approximate translations, in the entire color and fragrance of the universe, it was her design, it was her supervision, it was her input, it was her hard work. Otherwise, if that beloved of mine with a body like a flowering rose, if that beloved of mine did not exist, where would the spring and its bloom come from? It is her that supplies all the resources for the blooming spring. So Bahaar for the lover in multiple ways reminds him of the beloved. In this first line, someone has offered or suggested to Ghalib a stroll in the garden. This offer surely comes from some well-wisher or some friend who is seeing Ghalib so distressed and so grieved due to the separation from the beloved. They have offered a stroll in the garden to Ghalib in a hope that it will clear Ghalib's head. It will make Ghalib feel better. It will give Ghalib an opportunity to get some fresh air. This Sair-e-Baagh is not only the specific physical activity of strolling and walking in the garden, enjoying its beauty, but it is also metaphorically talking about all the activities one does for recreation, for amusement. In na do, don't give me, right? In the first line, na do, Ghalib captures in na do the extreme disinterest of the sorrowful, grieved lover, not only for Sair-e-Baagh or stroll in the garden, but metaphorically for all recreation and amusement. The lover who is in the grief of separation from the beloved is not interested in anything that is amusing or recreational, including a stroll in the garden. Mir captures this beautifully. हमें तो बाग की तकलीफ से मुआफ करो. हमें तो बाग की तकलीफ से मुआफ करो कि सैरो कश्त नहीं रस्म अहले मातम की. The approximate translation is, pardon me, forgive me, excuse me from the trouble of strolling in the garden. Because strolls in the garden, walking by the garden, walking in the garden is not a tradition or an activity or a ritual for mourners, for people who are mourning, like the lovers in grief of separation. For these lovers, for these mourners, stroll in the garden is not a thing they indulge in, is not a ritual they do. Even Ghalib captures this very well. उनका ये शेर, मोहब्बत थी चमन से लेकिन अब ये बेदिमागी है कि मौजे बुए गुल से नाक में आता है दम मेरा. The approximate translation is, I used to be deeply in love with the garden and all its beauty, but now the mind is so out of place, so irritated, so vexed, so anxious that even the wave of air that has the perfume of roses in it makes me choke, makes my breath come up to my nose, nauseates me, right? And then another one from Mir Taki Mir, अच्छी लगे है तुझ बिन गुलकश्ते बाग किसको. अच्छी लगे है तुझ बिन गुलकश्ते बाग किसको, सोबत रखे गुलों से इतना दिमाग किसको. The approximate translation is, without you. Without you, all by myself alone, who can possibly enjoy the stroll in the garden along the flowers? Who would love the company of roses in such a state of mind? I just do not have the mood. I just do not have the nose that desires, wants the company of roses without you, in your absence. And then this last one from Allama Iqbal, Maqam-e parvirishe aho lala hai ye chaman. मकामे परवरिशे आहो लाला है ये चमन, ना सैरे गुल के लिए है ना आशिया के लिए. Beautiful couplet. The approximate translation is, this garden exists to nourish and flourish the laments of the nightingale, by extension the lover, and the flowers, right, that bloom in response to those laments. It is not meant for strolls, neither it is meant for nests of the birds. All it is meant for is ah all lala, laments and blooming flowers. In this first line, so all those couplets gave us a very nice insight into how the lover perceives the garden, especially in this specific state of grief of separation from the beloved. Taklif, right, is at the heart of this first line. Ghalib captures the extreme discomfort and pain of the lover going through sorrow of separation from the beloved. Things that on a normal day would bring joy and pleasure and a smile to the lover's face, things like blossoming garden in spring, today in his grieved state are actually a torture for the lover. It is one thing to dislike something, but then it is a totally different thing to dislike something you once liked, you once loved. That's a very tough journey, right? Disliking something immediately, first hand, right? Okay, cool. I saw it, I didn't like it. But to like something, to love something, and then dislike it, that's a tough journey to take. For the lover, the blossoming garden in spring was a personification of the beloved's beauty and essence, her color and her perfume. Today, the same blossoming garden feels like a torture. The garden has not changed. The garden has not changed. It is the lover and the beloved dynamic that has changed, making the same garden bring such different, almost opposite reaction from the lover. So that takes care of the first line. Let's move on to the second line. मुझे दिमाग नहीं Khandaa-ha-e-Bejaa का. I am in no mood for misplaced or out of place smiles. मुझे दिमाग नहीं. He starts the second line with मुझे दिमाग नहीं. मुझे दिमाग नहीं literally translates to I have no mind, but actually means I am in no mood at all. I am in no mood at all. मुझे दिमाग नहीं was a very commonly used phrase by Ghalib in his Diwan. At DGMZ, we did a deep, extensive explanation of this phrase, Dimaag Nahi, for Ghazal 22, couplet 7. Check out that episode if you want to dive deeper into this phrase, Dimaag Nahi. But for today, here is the couplet. Dimaage itre pairahan nahi hai, Gham-e haye sabah kya. I have no mind, I am in no mood for the perfume of her garment. What grief, what complaint can I have on the wandering nature of the breeze, of the zephyr? So, back to our couplet. Ghalib is in no mood. Well, the next question will be, in no mood for what? Khandaa-ha-e-Bejaa. Misplaced smiles. Khanda is smiles, Bejaa is misplaced, out of place, excessive, over the top, right? Now, as DGMC viewers, you know that we share with you our difficulties and challenges that we face when we prepare these episodes. For this episode, dear viewers, our biggest challenge came in this complex, Khandaa-ha-e-Bejaa. This was the part we struggled with the most. Our understanding of it for a long time was not passing the DGMC test. If you are an old viewer here, you know what a DGMC test is. The big question in front of us was, whose smiles is Ghalib talking about? Because second line, Mujhe Dimaagh nahi Khandaa-ha-e-Bejaa ka, I'm in no mood for misplaced smiles. That's what he says. But whose smiles? There were two possible options. One, smiles of the blooming flowers in the garden, and two, smiles of Ghalib, the lover, the grieved lover. Take a second and think, which one are you leaning towards? We are very curious to know at the preliminary phase, which one do you think Ghalib is referring to? Is it the smiles of the blooming flowers, or is it the smiles of the lover? Put it in the comments. We are very keen to know what you thought before you heard the entire impression. Anyway, let's share with you how step by step we tried to decipher and decode this one. Now, let's pick the smile of the blooming flowers first. In Urdu poetry, Gul-e-Khanda or Khandaa-e-Gul, smile of a flower, is a fairly frequently used phrase. We have covered this in some detail in Ghazal 26, couplet 7. You can check that episode out if you want to dive deeper. This is the couplet. बाग में मुझको ना ले जा वरना मेरे हाल पर हर गुले तर एक चश्मे खूंफिशा हो जाएगा. Do not take me in the garden, otherwise, seeing my state, every dew-drenched rose in the garden will become a blood-scattering eye. We need to spend a few minutes on the smile of a blooming flower and its significance, its symbolic importance in Urdu poetry. As we know, the fact of the matter is that every flower starts as a very tightly closed bud. Have you ever tried to force open a bud? If you have, did you succeed? Could you make it bloom? Well, you simply can't. You can't. The bud will not open by any force. It will get destroyed. It will get torn apart, but it will not open. It will not bloom for anyone under any force. The blooming of a bud happens from its internal core, from its internal force. It is a phenomena that springs from the heart of the bud. This natural force very systematically, very patiently unravels one bud petal after the other and makes the bud blossom into a flower. Urdu poetry captures this opening of the bud in a very eloquent and a specific kind of a way. Urdu poetry details what that exact stimulus is that makes the bud to yearn and desire to open voluntarily and blossom. The bud knows as long as it is a tight, closed bud, it will survive. But as soon as it starts blooming, it starts on the last lap of its journey. Because once the bloom is done, withering will start. And withering will result in the falling off the flower into dust. Despite this knowledge that the bloom is the beginning of its end, the bud has this irresistible urge to bloom, irresistible urge to start its journey, to start the last lap of its journey, right? So, what is it that, what is the word I'm looking for? Majboor kar deta hai. What is it that makes the bud helpless, forces the bud to bloom? Urdu poetry says it is the love songs and the laments of the nightingale in the garden. The nightingale continuously singing in the garden about its love and grief pierces the heart of these buds, tears at the hearts of these buds, and then these buds reciprocate that pain, that love, making them split open their heart in response, and that is what makes them bloom. By extension, makes them smile. This blooming, this smiling, my dear viewers, is the ironical twist of Gul-e-Khanda or Khandaa-e-Kul. The flower, which is perceived as blooming and smiling by everyone, is actually a flower that has torn open its heart. Chak damani. Chak is split open, torn open, and damani is your garment. So the attire of the rose, right? The whole body of the rose or the bud splits open. Its core in reciprocation to the laments and love songs of the nightingale. Urdu poetry is full of shares of this unique phenomena. I've told you that episode, right? I'll put it in the end screen. We went through that Oscar Wilde song or poem in that episode. So all poets, not only Urdu but even in English poetry, talk about the way the nightingale tears at the heart of these buds and tears open their hearts, making them bloom. Shahab Lakhnavi का ये शेर, नालाए बुलबुल से गुंचों के कलेजे फट गए, गुलिस्ता वाले समझते हैं कि गुल खांदा हुए. The approximate translation is, from the laments of the nightingale, the hearts of the flowers split open, tore open, and the garden and people strolling in the garden thought that the flowers were smiling, the flowers were blooming. But what was happening was their hearts were splitting open, tearing open. रहमान कंवर का ये शेर, वो चाक दामनी गुल का राज क्या जाने, भरी बहार में जो खार बेलिबास रहे. The approximate translation is, how can they ever figure out the mystery of chak damani, of the torn attire of flowers, those thorns that even in spring were naked. You need to be wearing beautiful attire like a flower to understand what tearing it apart means. Thorns cannot understand it because they were born naked. And then Mirza Ghalib का ये शेर कहता है, कौन नालाए बुलबुल को बेअसर, पर्दे में गुल के लाख जिगर चाक हो गए. One of our favorites. So approximate translation is, who says that the love songs and the laments of the nightingale have no impact? Under the camouflage of the beautiful dressed up roses, multiple hearts lay ripped open, torn open, split open. Hearts of the buds. Therefore, in Urdu poetry, the smile of a flower is one of the examples that are used for a smile that hides beneath it a lot of pain, a lot of longing, a lot of grief. It's a smile that is Bejaa, misplaced, It is a smile that is out of place. On the face of a blooming flower, there is no reason for a smile to be, but that's what the flower does. Smiles on the surface as it blooms and gives everyone the joy and pleasure of its beauty. But underneath it all, the flower harbors the grief of the nightingale's laments and love songs, which make the flower respond and reciprocate to that pain by starting on its own last lap of journey, by splitting open its heart, splitting open its core and blooming. The flower knows that as soon as it splits open and blooms in response to the laments and love songs of the nightingale, it will very soon start withering. It will very soon dry and fall off, but it does it. Such is the irresistible pull of the nightingale's laments and love songs. आतिश भावलपुरी का ये शेर, अगर दिल में तमन्नाए नशाते रंगो बू रखना. Beautiful couplet. अगर दिल में तमन्नाए नशात और रंगो बू रखना, माल खांदा गुल को भी अपने रूबरू रखना. The approximate translation is, if in your heart you harbor or you have the intense desire to enjoy the joys and pleasures of color and perfume, then you should keep in front of you the end of a blooming rose, the ultimate result, the ultimate destiny of the blooming rose. All this perfume, all this color comes at a very heavy price. The rose almost gives up its right to live, gives up its right to survive when it blooms up for color and perfume. So if you have that desire for color and perfume, keep a rose, keep a blooming flower always in your mind, so that you know there is a price that is paid for such beautiful colors, for such beautiful perfumes. कौसर सिद्दीकी का ये शेर, खांदाए गुल में भी पोशीदा फुगा हो जैसे. खांदाए गुल में भी पोशीदा फुगा हो जैसे, शाखे गुल अंजुमने नौहा गरा हो जैसे. The approximate translation is, as if in every smiling flower, in every smiling bloom is hidden the grief, the lament, the sighs. As if in every blooming smiling flower is hidden grief and lament and sighs. It seems that a flowering branch is almost a congregation, collection, assembly of all these laments. I don't see blooming flowers on this flowering stalk. I see a collection of laments, a collection of grieving faces when I see these blooming flowers, because I know, I'm a lover, I know that underneath these smiles is a lot of pain. So that takes care of the first option, that the smiles that Ghalib mentions in the second line belong to the blooming flowers. Let's move on to the second option, where it is the smile of the lover. For a lover going through an intense period of grief of separation, a smile would be an impossible task, a very difficult task to achieve. Unfortunately, in a place like a blooming, beautiful public garden, there would be many people enjoying a stroll, enjoying a walk in the scenic place. Now, if the lover was to step in such a garden, he would have to acknowledge these peoples, extend courtesy to these people, smile at these people, right? This smile of the lover would be so much similar to the smiles of the blooming flowers in the garden. These smiles of the lover would be Khandaa-e-Bejaa, a smile that is out of place, a smile that is misplaced, a smile which underneath it hides grief, lament, and pain that is not visible to anyone. People will only focus on the smile that is visible on the surface. Now, after that background on misplaced smiles of both the blooming flowers and the grieved lover, we, in DGMZ's humble opinion, can appreciate the mastery and craftsmanship of this second line by Ghalib. Ghalib, true to his style, does not specify whose smile he is referring to. All he confirms is that he is in no mood for misplaced smiles. This works beautifully and cleverly in both ways. The first one is that lover does not want to go in the garden because then he will have to receive the smiles from the blooming flowers in the garden. The grieved lover can see through the deception of these smiles on the flowers, and while others see blossoming beauty in these flowers, the lover sees the chak damani, the tearing open up of the heart, the core, the entire soul of these flowers. The grieved lover is in no mood to receive these smiles that have deep pain and anguish lying hidden beneath them. Now, the second way the lover is in no mood for misplaced smiles is because he will have to give them. By going to a stroll in the garden in his grieved state, the lover will put himself in a position where he will be forced to greet and smile at other people strolling in the garden. These smiles given from the grieved lover will be again out of place, misplaced. So, we can see neither is the lover in a mood to receive misplaced smiles from the blooming flowers, nor is he in a mood to give misplaced smiles from himself to people strolling in the garden. So, that takes care of the second line. Now let's take a few minutes to look at this couplet in totality. Gham-e-Firaaq में Taklif-e-Sair-e-Baagh ना दो, मुझे दिमाग नहीं, Khandaa-ha-e-Bejaa का. Primarily, the couplet is about the intense, grieved state of the lover, where anything and everything that used to bring him joy and pleasure and thoughts and dreams of the beloved today are things that torture him and increase the pain and grief of separation. The mastery, the magical touch, however, is in the way Ghalib weaves in first the stroll of the garden and then the smiles of blooming flowers. To accentuate and highlight the lover's state, Ghalib brings in the profound concept of a smiling flower into the couplet in his famous unsaid way. In DGMZ's humble opinion, if we were to skim the couplet, we would only grab the fact that the lover is in no mood to give misplaced smiles to people strolling in the garden, and hence he does not want to go into the garden. But the unsaid in the couplet is that the lover also does not want to receive any misplaced smiles. And in this case, from the blooming flowers, because even that will be a source of pain and aggravation for the lover. The lover in his state of grief is in no mood to either give or receive any misplaced smiles, any false smiles. Ghalib का ही शेर, कल दिल आज़ुर्दा गुलिस्तां से गुजर हमने किया, गुल लगे कहने कहो, मुंह ना उधर हमने किया. So the approximate translation is, yesterday, with this afflicted heart of mine, I passed by the garden. All the blooming roses began to say something. And I did not turn my face their way. By extension, I did not respond to them. Because Dil Asurda, because The heart was so afflicted. Yes, I was passing through the garden, but the heart was so afflicted that even though the roses called out to me, I did not respond to them. I could not respond to them. So, again, a very interesting couplet where if you stick to the said, it is a little straightforward, but if you open up room for the unsaid, you just see the mastery of the maestro, right? How Ghalib in words is saying, I have no mood for misplaced smiles, but the unsaid captures, I have no mood for misplaced smiles given to me, and I have no mood for misplaced smiles given by me. लाला माधव राम जौहर का ये शेर, नालाए बुलबुले शायदा तो सुना हंस हंस कर, अब जिगर थाम के बैठो मेरी बारी आई. The approximate translation is, you listened to the laments and love songs of the nightingale while you were laughing, while you were smiling. But now, hold on to your seats. Grab your hearts, because it is my turn. It is my turn. By extension, it is the lover's turn. So, that brings us to the end of गम-ए-फिराक में तकलीफ-ए-सैर-ए-बाग ना दो, मुझे दिमाग नहीं, खांदा-हा-ए-बेजा का. We hope you enjoyed the impression. As always, we will be very keen to listen to your feedback and comments. Now for the new viewers, a very strong recommendation to access the episode titled Introduction to DGMC, because that will give you a good insight into the motivation and inspiration behind this podcast. To the regular viewers, feel free to visit the homepage of the channel, surf through it. All the playlists are segregated by topics and ghazals that we keep completing. Surf through them, pick an episode that interests you. Now, I'm going to go ahead and end this episode by sending a lot of love and light to all you dear viewers, and thanks for watching.